When Pam Bondi leaned forward in that hearing room, her tone carried the confidence of a seasoned prosecutor, steady, composed, and unafraid to challenge anyone sitting across from her. She had spent years in courtrooms and press briefings, refining her ability to use pressure as a tool. So when she questioned Jasmine Crockett about accountability, it wasn't out of hostility, but habit. She was doing what she had always done, pushing for a reaction, testing the strength of the person she was facing. But Jasmine didn't respond the way most people might have. She didn't meet pressure with pressure, or try to out-talk Bondi. Instead, she stayed still. Her hands were folded, her expression thoughtful. You could almost see the calculation behind her eyes, the deliberate choice to remain calm. It wasn't hesitation, it was control. In moments like that, where tension fills every inch of space, composure becomes its own form of power. And Jasmine Crockett understood that better than most. She had come from an environment where emotion was often mistaken for weakness, where raising your voice could instantly define how others saw you. But she had learned that true authority doesn't need volume, it needs balance. When she finally replied, her words were slow, almost gentle, but they carried an undeniable weight. She didn't interrupt, didn't deflect, didn't even seem offended. She simply reframed the moment. By asking Bondi whether she looked in the mirror, Jasmine turned the focus inward, not just toward Bondi, but toward everyone watching. It wasn't an insult. It was a reminder. Composure, in that instant, became the difference between reaction and response. Pam Bondi had fired a challenge meant to unsettle her, and Jasmine had turned it into a reflection of character. That shift wasn't just clever. It was deeply human. It showed that strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it whispers. You could see the effect immediately. Bondi didn't fire back. She looked at Jasmine for a second, perhaps measuring what had just happened. In her world, sharpness and precision were the tools of success. But Crockett's calmness had introduced something different, an unexpected kind of discipline that silenced the entire room. It was the kind of silence that doesn't come from shock, but from respect. Afterward, as people replayed that moment online, it became clear why it resonated so deeply. Everyone has been in a situation where composure was tested, whether in a meeting, a conversation, or a disagreement that felt personal. What Jasmine demonstrated was a universal truth. The one who stays calm doesn't just protect their dignity, they also take control of the narrative. Pam Bondi, for all her experience and authority, had faced a kind of resistance she couldn't argue with. Not defiance, but grace. Crockett's composure created an invisible boundary, one that said, "You can question my actions, but not my peace." That was a message louder than any raised voice could have delivered. Even those who disagreed with Jasmine's politics couldn't ignore how she handled herself. The comment sections and headlines that followed didn't focus on policy points or party lines. They talked about her tone, her posture, and the way she diffused tension without surrendering ground. In an era where every disagreement seems to escalate into spectacle, her quiet strength felt refreshing. For Bondi. That moment was likely a reminder that the sharpest minds don't always strike hardest. Sometimes they absorb, reflect, and redirect. Both women had built careers on conviction, but only one had chosen stillness as her weapon that day. And that choice transformed the atmosphere entirely. Crocketts.com didn't make her passive, it made her precise. It allowed her to choose her words carefully, to land them exactly where they needed to go. And in doing so, she turned a pointed accusation into a philosophical question, one that lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling. Her composure also served a deeper purpose. It modeled a kind of emotional intelligence that's often missing in political spaces. When someone attacks or challenges us, the instinct is to defend, to prove, to fight back. But composure requires discipline, the ability to stand still in the storm, to let words settle before responding. Jasmine showed that discipline with remarkable clarity. Pam Bondi may have initiated the confrontation, but Jasmine Crockett's calmness ended it. Not by overpowering her opponent, but by outlasting the emotion behind the moment. That's the hidden power of composure. It doesn't just quiet others, it steadies you. And in that hearing room, surrounded by flashing cameras and restless murmurs, that steadiness spoke volumes. Respect is a strange kind of power. It doesn't always show up through agreement or admiration. Sometimes it appears in how do people disagree. When Pam Bondi and Jasmine Crockett faced each other across that long congressional table, there was no shouting match, no personal insults, no name-calling, just two women standing firm in their beliefs. Both carried reputations built on conviction. Bondi was known for her directness, the way she could slice through an argument with sharp phrasing and an unyielding stare. Crockett, on the other hand, had built her presence on authenticity, her words always grounded, her tone deliberate. And while their worldviews couldn't have been further apart, what held that exchange together wasn't confrontation. It was respect. When Pam Bondi questioned Jasmine, she did so with precision. Her voice didn't tremble or rise. It was the tone of someone who had spent years navigating complex cases, asking the uncomfortable questions that others avoided. She wasn't trying to humiliate Jasmine. She was testing her. That's how she operated, by applying pressure, seeing who could hold steady beneath it. She respected strength, and in politics, strength often reveals itself under scrutiny. But Crockett met that test differently than expected. She didn't counter with sarcasm or anger. Instead, she listened, truly listened, before choosing her response. It wasn't submission. It was strategy. There's a kind of power in letting silence do part of the talking. By not interrupting, she signaled confidence. By waiting, she gave herself time to think, and that patience drew attention. When she finally spoke, it wasn't loud, but it landed with clarity. Her words weren't designed to sting. They were designed to shift the temperature of the room. That's what respect does. It changes the energy without demanding it. Crockett's reply didn't just address Bondi's question. It acknowledged her presence. She didn't treat her like an adversary to be crushed, but like an equal to be answered. That subtle balance made the moment powerful. Pam Bondi, for all her assertiveness, seemed to recognize it too. You could see it in the brief pause that followed, the small flicker of acknowledgement in her eyes. She wasn't used to being met with quiet authority. Most people either pushed back too fast or shrank away entirely, but Jasmine stood her ground without breaking the rhythm of her composure. It was mutual recognition to professionals, who understood what it meant to face someone equally unshaken. That sense of respect didn't erase the disagreement between them, but it redefined it. It reminded everyone watching that opposition doesn't have to mean hostility. You can challenge someone and still maintain dignity. And perhaps that's what stood out most to the audience that day. The maturity of it all. In an era where televised hearings often turn into soundbite contests, this one felt almost old-fashioned in its civility. Even the tone of their voices reflected something deeper. Bondi's was steady, with that unmistakable firmness she had honed as a prosecutor. Crockett's was reflective, measured each sentence chosen with care. Together, they created a kind of conversational rhythm that allowed disagreement without disrespect. It was a rare glimpse of what public discourse could be when conviction doesn't require cruelty. Later, when the exchange went viral, people weren't just replaying it for the words. They were studying the manner, the posture, the patience, the restraint. Respect isn't something you announce. It's something you show in how you handle confrontation. Jasmine showed it by not escalating. Pam showed it by not interrupting once the reply began. For a moment, the two shared a mutual understanding that real strength is found not in dominance, but in restraint. That restraint made the moment resonate far beyond politics. It reminded people watching that civility isn't weakness. It's control. It's knowing that dignity doesn't depend on being right. It depends on how you carry yourself when you're challenged. Crockett earned attention because she respected the process, even as she defended herself within it. Bondi earned attention because she asked hard questions without crossing into personal territory. Both walked away with their integrity intact. In that sense, the hearing didn't have a clear winner. Instead, it had two individuals who proved that standing your ground doesn't have to come at the expense of someone else's respect. Their exchange became a subtle lesson in balance, that disagreement can still leave room for understanding, that confidence doesn't require contempt, and that sometimes the most impactful debates are the ones where everyone leaves with their voice and their dignity untouched. When the clip of Pam Bondi and Jasmine Crockett's exchange began to circulate online, something interesting happened. People weren't dissecting every word or debating which side had won. Instead, they were talking about the way each woman carried herself. It wasn't just about what was said, but how it was said. Tone, body language, and composure became the real subjects of conversation. In politics, that's often where perception is shaped, not in policy points or statistics, but in the moments that feel human. Pam Bondi had entered the hearing with her usual confidence. She spoke with the precision of someone who understood the weight of her words. Every syllable seemed measured, every pause intentional. For years, she had been known for her command of a room, not by raising her voice, but by knowing when not to. That kind of presence is hard to earn and even harder to maintain. So when she turned her focus toward Jasmine Crockett, the expectation was that her sharp questioning would dominate the exchange. But Crockett's response changed everything. Her voice, calm and grounded, created a contrast that shifted how people experienced the moment. She didn't appear defensive or shaken. Instead, she seemed centered, like someone who understood that being composed on camera mattered just as much as being correct. That kind of awareness doesn't happen by accident. It comes from experience, from knowing that public perception can either build or break credibility. What viewers saw wasn't a heated clash, but a study in contrast to different communication styles colliding in real time. Bondi represented the assertive, courtroom-trained precision of authority. Crockett embodied a quieter, more reflective steadiness that invited people to listen instead of react. The difference in tone became the story itself. Public perception thrives on moments like these because audiences respond to what feels authentic. Pam Bondi's directness carried the authority of someone who's been there, who's handled intense scrutiny before. Jasmine's calmness, on the other hand, gave her an air of sincerity that resonated with viewers tired of seeing politicians lose their tempers on live television. When the two styles met, it created a balance that felt strangely refreshing. Sharpness met composure, and for once, neither turned ugly. People began sharing the clip, not to debate policy, but to praise the professionalism of the exchange. Some admired Bondi's poise and command of language, others applauded Crockett's restraint and emotional intelligence. The conversation became less about partisanship and more about demeanor, about how both women managed to keep the temperature low even when the questions ran deep. In the fast-moving world of social media, perception is everything. A single phrase can be taken out of context. A single gesture can define a reputation. That's why what happened in that hearing stood out. Neither woman gave the internet what it usually feeds on. No shouting, no personal attacks, no chaos. Instead, they gave viewers something rarer. Composure under pressure. Pam Bondi's expression after Jasmine spoke said a lot. She didn't roll her eyes or interrupt. She listened, took a breath, and moved on. That restraint was noticed too. It reminded people that respect doesn't have to mean agreement. It can simply mean recognizing that the person across from you is worth hearing. That small decision to listen instead of argue shaped how both women were perceived afterward. The more people replayed the moment, the more they noticed the subtleties, the steady tone in Jasmine's voice, the measured stillness in Bondi's posture, the absence of aggression in a space where aggression is almost expected. Those small details created a ripple effect. Commentators began describing it as an example of how leadership is communicated through demeanor, how even disagreement can be handled with grace. Public perception isn't built on facts alone. It's built on impressions, the way a person makes others feel. Pam Bondi had always projected command and confidence. Jasmine Crockett, through her calm and measured response, projected authenticity and emotional control. Both qualities drew respect from different audiences, but together, they painted a picture of what political discourse could look like when personality doesn't overshadow purpose. In a time where debates often devolve into theatrics, this moment stood out because it didn't. It wasn't explosive or sensational, yet it spread quickly. People saw something rare. Professionalism without pretense, disagreement without disrespect. The exchange showed that perception is crafted not by who talks the longest or loudest, but by who stays grounded when the spotlight burns brightest. And that, in the end, became the most memorable part of it all. Leadership can take many forms. Sometimes it's bold and commanding, demanding the room's attention. Other times, it's quiet, measured in pauses, in eye contact, and the willingness to listen before speaking. During that tense exchange between Pam Bondi and Jasmine Crockett, what unfolded wasn't just a clash of perspectives. It was a moment that revealed how leadership can be defined not by dominance, but by the discipline to stay composed. Pam Bondi had walked into that hearing with years of legal and political experience behind her. She was used to being in control, asking sharp questions, keeping witnesses on edge, navigating situations where hesitation could be mistaken for weakness. Her version of leadership was grounded in precision and authority. Every question she asked, every glance she gave, carried intention. So when she directed her attention toward Jasmine Crockett, she did it with that same purposeful confidence. Crockett, however, had a different rhythm. Her leadership wasn't about commanding attention, it was about earning it. She listened, not because she didn't have a reply ready, but because she understood that silence can be a form of strength. When Bondi questioned her integrity, Jasmine didn't rush to defend herself. She let the room breathe for a moment. That pause, subtle yet deliberate, was the hallmark of someone who leads through patience rather than impulse. When she finally spoke, her words were calm and centered, but layered with meaning. She didn't retaliate, she reflected. By turning Bondi's question about accountability back toward introspection, Jasmine shifted the power dynamic of the conversation. Suddenly, it wasn't just about who was right, it was about who was in control of the tone. And in that instant, it was Jasmine. Leadership through listening is often misunderstood as passivity. But in that room, it became clear that it was anything but. It was an active choice, a calculated decision to de-escalate without yielding. Jasmine Crockett didn't overpower Pam Bondi. She balanced her. Where Bondi brought intensity, Crockett brought composure. Where one led through questioning, the other led through reflection. Together, they created an exchange that demonstrated two very different, yet equally valid approaches to leadership. The audience could feel it too. You could sense the shift in energy after Jasmine spoke. The murmurs died down, the camera zoomed in, and even Pam Bondi seemed momentarily disarmed. Not because she had been out-argued, but because she had been met with a level of poise that demanded acknowledgement. That's the kind of moment that reminds people what true leadership looks like, not the loudest voice in the room, but the one that steadies it. In many ways. Bondi's challenge gave Crockett the opportunity to display that side of herself. Without the confrontation, the calm might have gone unnoticed. Leadership often reveals itself under pressure, and the hearing that day was a stage for that revelation. Crockett showed that listening isn't just a courtesy, it's strategy. It gives you time to read the room, to measure your words, to turn emotion into intention. Asterisk even for Pam Bondi, a woman deeply familiar with confrontation. There was a visible recognition of that strength. After Jasmine's response, Bondi didn't continue pressing. She nodded slightly and moved to her next point. A quiet acknowledgement that the moment had been met with equal force, not in volume, but in control. It was respect meeting respect. Experience meeting composure. Asterisk viewers later commented on how refreshing it was to see two public figures engage without shouting over each other. It wasn't just civil, it was instructive. People saw what it meant to lead with clarity instead of chaos. Jasmine's ability to hold her ground without raising her tone demonstrated emotional intelligence. The kind of leadership that inspires rather than intimidates. Asterisk. Pam Bondi's own form of leadership was evident too. Her sharpness wasn't cruelty, it was conviction. She represented a type of leader who asks hard questions and expects accountability. And while her style was more assertive, it made Jasmine's restraint shine even brighter. The balance between them showed that leadership isn't about one approach being superior, it's about knowing when to use which. Asterisk in the end. What made that exchange memorable wasn't who had the better argument, it was how both women handled the moment. Bondi, through her authority, set the challenge. Crockett, through her composure, met it. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching that true leadership isn't proven in speeches or statements, it's proven in presence. It's in how you respond when all eyes are on you, when pressure demands reaction, and you choose, instead, to listen first. Asterisk. As the hearing drew to a close and the buzz in the room began to fade, one thing became clear. What had just unfolded was more than a political exchange. It was a reminder of how character reveals itself when the stakes are high. Pam Bondi and Jasmine Crockett had stepped into the same space with vastly different approaches, yet both walked away having left an impression that extended far beyond their words. Asterisk in a world where every disagreement seems to demand a winner and a loser. This encounter refused to fit that mold. There was no shouting match, no verbal victory lap. What people saw instead was a moment of balance, firmness meeting grace, challenge meeting composure. It showed that strength doesn't always mean overpowering someone. Sometimes it means holding steady when the pressure is greatest. Asterisk Pam Bondi, with her signature precision and commanding tone, reminded everyone why she had built a career out of asking the hard questions. She represented the kind of leadership that thrives on accountability, that believes in facing conflict head on. Her directness, though sharp at times, came from a place of conviction, from years spent demanding clarity in spaces where truth was often blurred by emotion. That kind of strength deserves recognition. Asterisk, but what made the moment unforgettable was how Jasmine Crockett met that energy. She didn't match Bondi's intensity. She redefined it. Her calm response didn't dilute her message. It deepened it. By listening, by thinking, by choosing not to let emotion steer her words, Jasmine demonstrated that leadership isn't about reaction, it's about regulation. She showed the quiet kind of power that doesn't seek to dominate a room, but earns its respect nonetheless. Asterisk, as viewers watched the replay again and again, they weren't simply analyzing policy points or debating political affiliations. They were drawn to the tone, the posture, the discipline. They saw two women who didn't back down, yet didn't let pride dictate the conversation. That subtle balance turned a fleeting exchange into something lasting. A small moment that spoke volumes about integrity and self-control. Asterisk, it's rare, in modern politics, to see confrontation handled with such restraint. The age of televised hearings has often turned disagreement into performance. But this time, what resonated most was what didn't happen. No chaos, no raised voices, no personal attacks. Just two professionals holding firm in their truths. It reminded people that composure is not weakness, and empathy is not surrender. Asterisk in the end. Both Pam Bondi and Jasmine Crockett walked out of that room with their reputations intact, perhaps even strengthened. Bondi's toughness and directness remained undeniable. Crockett's poise and clarity earned her newfound respect. Together, they illustrated a truth that extends far beyond politics, that true leadership lies not in silencing others, but in elevating the tone of the conversation. Asterisk, sometimes the most powerful moments aren't the ones filled with noise, but the ones that leave you thinking in silence. What happened between Pam Bondi and Jasmine Crockett did exactly that. It didn't divide. It reminded people watching from every side that leadership, at its best, it is less about victory and more about virtue. The kind that commands attention not through force, but through calm, conviction,